My story begins not too long ago. I decided to use my computer skills to run a small darknet forum mainly just to share information without censorship. At first I was extremely paranoid about my site being hacked and having privacy being compromised, so I went online and began to research everything that I would need to ensure my own safety. After countless days of searching blogs, forums, and other material, I decided I was ready now. I didn't have any money, so I couldn't just buy a VPS and host site. So I decided to use my old laptop. After all, I wasn't planning on running a major website. So after setting the server up, and what I thought was literally every single thing I could do to harden it against an attack, I put the site online. Everything went great for a couple of months. Donations rolled in as the user base grew larger and larger. After around 5 months, the user base had gotten so big, I had to upgrade and migrate everything to a new PC, which I built just to host the forum. And from there, everything seemed perfect. The site was running smoothly, and there were no issues with the migration until one day, when I came home, I noticed the PC had frozen. I didn't think much about it. Maybe just a software bug caused it, so I rebooted it, and that's when it was clear to me that something was wrong with the PC. The PC lit up, and it beeped a few times, then shut off. So I thought to myself, okay, it's an hardware issue. After a few hours trying to diagnose the issue, I figured it out, and it turned out that the RAM had been corrupted. I took it back to the store since it was still under warranty. The customer service rep just told me it might have just been a faulty stick. So when I got home, I replaced the stick of RAM and had the site back up running within a few hours. Everything seemed to be perfect again. I apologized to the users for the downtime, and everyone seemed to be happy. Fast forward a few months. The forum's been up and running for around a year, maybe a year and a half. Now this is when everything started to get really weird. I finished work on a Friday. It was a gorgeous day in the middle of the summer. I came home and got something to eat, and I sat down in front of my PC and I noticed I had a message. Upon opening the message, I realized somewhere I messed up. I don't really know why anybody would actually target me. The message had my details from my name, address, bank details, passwords, private emails, private messages, everything nearly from every single device I owned. I freaked out and I immediately took the PC offline, turned my internet off. But little did I know, this guy had done his research. After a couple of hours pacing my room, I received a text message. I know everything about you. The message was sent via some type of SMS service, so there was no way to trace it. And then my phone rang. Don't talk, just listen. I know everything there is to know about you, and all I want is 2 Bitcoin, or things will get worse. I'll send you a text with the wallet details. The phone call ended just as quickly as it started. I opened my laptop up, checked my Bitcoin wallet, and there was enough left over from the donations just to pay this guy off, and hoped that would be the end of it. So I entered the guy's details and sent the payment. Then my phone rang again. Thank you for complying. Unfortunately, someone I know really likes you. He hung up. Panicking, I tried calling the number back. An automated message began to play. The number you have dialed has not been recognized. A few hours passed, and I began to think to myself, well, maybe the last call was just having fun, and decided after a long day I'd just go to bed. Sometime around 2 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of banging at my front door. I jumped out of bed and I turned on all of my lights, grabbing a knife from the kitchen. I walked slowly toward the window and looked out. I could see someone standing by a car. When they spotted me, they got in and they drove off. I rushed to the door in hopes I might be able to get the license plate, but by the time I opened it, they'd already turned the corner. As I turned, I noticed an envelope on the floor. I picked it up, went back inside and locked the door. I closed the curtains and sat in the kitchen. I placed the envelope on the counter, stared at it for around half an hour, trying to muster up the courage to open it. Did these guys really come to my home? I thought to myself. After that 30 minutes was up, I decided enough was enough. I opened up the envelope, and pictures fell out onto the counter. They were of me sleeping. These guys had not only been outside my house, they'd been inside while I was sleeping. The images had been edited. Strange love hearts had been added next to me. So now I was sufficiently freaked out. I didn't go back to sleep, and when the sun broke darkness, I decided to head to the police station and tell them everything. I hadn't broken any laws, so I hoped they would just help me. At least after hours of explaining everything to them, they told me there was nothing they could do. At this point, I had never felt so alone in the world and helpless. I was scared of what this guy was planning. I didn't have the foggiest idea of what I was supposed to do or expect, so I decided to wipe everything off my laptop, off my PC, and my phone. I picked up everything that I needed, stuffed it all into a bag, and decided to leave. I had a couple of friends that I knew I could rely on, so I called up my buddy Marcus, and we met, had a few beers, and I explained everything to him. He offered me a place to stay, and I hoped that would be the end of it. I was definitely wrong. A few days later, it happened again. There was a knock at the door, first thing in the morning. Marcus and I both went out to find another envelope on the floor. Same thing, pictures of me sleeping, but these were in Marcus's house. I started freaking out again, and Marcus just said, "Okay, we'll need to do something, maybe set a trap or something." So we went over numerous ideas. Everything you could think of, from cameras to baiting him, and we settled on the idea of staying up during the night and locking him in a room. We filled the bed up with pillows, set up cameras, and even barred the windows in the room. We hid in the room next to the door. After a few hours had passed, we heard the lock rattling on the front door, and we knew it was game time. We left the door just slightly ajar so we could see outside. As he went past, and the moment he went into the room, we both sprung to action as quickly as possible. We closed the door and locked it from the outside using a chair and metal bar. There was only one way he was getting out. He'd have to destroy the door. We could see the silhouette of him as he paced the room, quietly. It was creepy. We called the police as we kept an eye on him. At last I thought I can finish this and move on with my life. Just as the police arrived, we noticed this guy take a gun out, place it to his head, then he held up a sign which read, "I love you," and he pulled the trigger. The police barged in, guns drawn, and told us both to get on the floor. We complied and shouted out that he's in there, pointing at the door. The police removed the makeshift lock and entered the room, called for an ambulance, and put me and Marcus in the back of the police car. I sat in the interview room for a good couple of hours, I guess while they carried out the investigation, when the detective came in and sat down in front of me, opening a folder, placing pictures on the table. "Do you know her?" "Her?" I said, looking at the pictures, and I told him no. He looked at me and said, "This is the person who's been stalking you." And he then began to tell me that they visited her room and found a shrine with photos of me all over the place, from restaurants to the gym and even shopping. He went on to tell me that she'd been the one that sent the messages, made the phone calls, etc. They also found a diary which had some kind of future plans for me and her. She wanted me to be her husband, and we'd been chatting for around a year and a half. After I explained everything, the detective said I was lucky to be alive. She had actually planned to drug me and kidnap me. She had even had some makeshift lock bed so I wouldn't be able to escape. To this day, I feel lucky, and I haven't been on a dark web ever since. For this story, my name will be Charlie. Years ago, my first year of college, I lived in a dorm. But if only I knew what was going to happen. I earned a scholarship to college for baseball, and all the players lived in one dorm. Being that I was a freshman, they roomed me with a senior so he could show me what right looks like. He was a pretty tough guy who no one would mess with, so I felt like I was in good hands. It was the winter, and by that time of the school year, I was pretty set in my ways and comfortable. I was invited to a house party that one of the sororities were throwing, so I went with a few friends. When we got there, it was like any other party. People were outside, and some were inside having fun. While inside, there was music playing, along with people playing video games in one room, and it looked like a board game going on in the other. That was upstairs. After a while, I went upstairs to see why anyone would be playing a board game at a party. When I got to the room, I noticed that it was the most quiet room in the house, which was odd to me. When I walked in the room, there were 4 girls and a guy sitting at a table. I asked what was going on, and they said they were using the Ouija board. I thought it sounded interesting, so I joined. But I never really believed in that type of stuff. While we were messing with the board, they said that there was a girl in the room, but I think that one of the other people that were playing moved it, so I left. That's when unexplainable stuff would happen to me in my dorm. I'd hear laughing in our hallways at odd times of the night, knocks on the window, and I started to have bad dreams. I told my roommate, but he told me it was stress from our upcoming midterms. That went on for about 2 weeks. Then one night everything changed for both of us. I remember it being a Thursday night when this happened. I was asleep in the middle of the night, and all I heard was, "Charlie! Charlie! Charlie, wake up!" I remember making noises and being half asleep, but I acknowledged him. Then he said something that woke me up immediately. "Charlie, what the fuck is that in the corner?" I looked in the corner of the room and I swear there was a silhouette of a girl. I was so afraid that I jumped off the top bunk and I told my roommate to get up and run, but he was so petrified. He was under his covers quivering. Then she spoke.
"Why do you seem so scared? All I wanted to do was play with you."
I told him I'm out and we both ran out of our room. He was yelling as she's talking. After that, we were both so shaken that we never went back to that room. We called the police, but when they came, they never found any girl. I don't know if it was because of the house party, Ouija board game, or coincidence, but that was a moment that I'll never forget. To this day, I still hear odd noises throughout the night wherever I go. When I was a little girl, maybe around 11 years old, a cult tried to recruit me and my friends through the dark web. This was in 2012. We lived in a gated community, but somehow this church named Assembly of Prayer Christian Church would have its members walking around trying to get everyone to attend their church. My friends and I would go to the local pool for our neighborhood, and these people were taking pictures of everyone, including parents, lifeguards, and us. We looked up their Facebook, but none of the pictures would be there. It only showed the outside of their building. Then a rumor started to circulate that these pictures were on the deep web. I didn't believe it until all of my friends and I went over our friend Greg's house. Greg went on a regular browser, but somehow got on the deep web. I didn't know much about it, so I just watched. We looked up Assembly of Prayer Christian Church, and some Facebook popped up again. We went to it, but we can see more photos than we could before. It was like we had more access than before, but still didn't see much, just inside their chapel. That's when Greg mentioned that the rest of the photos might be on the dark web. I only knew about the deep web, but they sounded like the same thing. That's when he went on a browser. It wasn't Tor, it was some other browser that I can't remember the name of. He made a call and asked someone on the phone where and how to search what he was looking for. We interrupted him, telling him that he needs to just put the church name in again. He said it's not that easy. When he got off the phone, he searched "Free the Dolphins" from Yellow Cowboy. Then the Facebook page popped up, but we had complete access, not as an admin, but as if we were a friend or we were following the page. Then we saw the pictures. But what was creepy is that every single picture had a name of the person, or multiple names if it were more than one person. We then saw our pictures. There were a picture with about 8 of us in it walking to the pool with a link under it. Greg clicked on it. We entered a live video. We were looking at the inside of the chapel with a man standing on a podium. He said, "Welcome, number 77. In the top right-hand corner of our screen was 77. We were number 77. Greg typed hi. Then the man on the stage said that he was called Chief, so just type Chief if we need him. Greg typed okay. Chief then said that he would continue. He picked up a picture. It was one of my friends. He held it in front of the camera, then everyone in the chat put numbers. I saw a lot of numbers between 1 and 5. A few were higher than 5. Greg looked at us confused. Then Chief looked at the camera and said, "Number 77, we're waiting for you." I believe he typed 3. I can't really remember. For the next hour or so, this man that was called Chief had put all of our pictures in front of the camera, and we were rated between 1 and 10. By coincidence, I had the highest rating. Out of nowhere, the stream ended, and we were back on the Facebook page with all of our pictures. But all of our pictures disappeared. Being that this is all we got on for, we got off, and all of us went home. The next couple of days seemed weird. The church people disappeared. No one was asking us to join anymore. One day, everything became even more strange. One of my friends were over my house while my parents were at work. We were on Facebook watching YouTube. We both paused and looked at each other. I looked outside the window and one of the people from the church were just standing there. I looked back at my friend and she pointed at the front door. I looked out the peephole and another guy was standing there. We looked out the back window and there were literally 20 people standing in a formation. So I called the police like any other person would. And of course, these people were long gone by the time the police arrived. The police said that they will keep a report on file. They tried looking at the security cameras throughout the neighborhood, but nothing was showing these people, and there were time gaps within the footage. It's been a while since this incident, but I will never forget what happened when I went on the dark web. I grew up with my grandma and lived with her most of my life. And her house always freaked me out because weird things happened. It's not like the house was old. No one had ever lived there previously, and it wasn't the typical scary house you think of when you think of a haunted house. I have my theories, but that's for another time, I suppose. Anyways, everyone in my family who stayed there has their own stories of things they've seen or heard, including myself. Some examples of what I experienced were hearing footsteps outside of my door in the middle of the night, hearing someone in the master bedroom walking around, and turning the sink on when I was the only one home. When I was young, I was sneaking downstairs to grab a snack and I turned the corner to go downstairs and saw a little girl sitting on a big box we had at the bottom of the stairs, seeing figures of people on the walls moving around, and the list goes on. These things happened throughout my life and were spaced out occurrences, so I tried to just ignore it all the best I could. But what I experienced when my grandma was dying were some of the most intense things I've ever witnessed. My grandma had breast cancer. Eventually it spread throughout her body, and she lost the battle. They put her on hospice and we set her up in the living room for her to stay in so we could take care of her. The last week of her life is when things really started to get, you could say, weird. I would be sitting on the couch next to her bed and see people in the corner of my eye walking past the doorway in the hallway, even when it was just me and her in the house. And when other people were there, they saw it too. There were times she would be looking up to the ceiling or at the walls and smile like she was looking at someone she knew. Another time, my whole family was on the couch just being there with her, and the light in the room went out, and my grandma smiled and said, "It'll come back on." And right when she said that, it did. While these occurrences were starting to happen frequently. But then the last few days of her life, she started declining more, so we bought a baby monitor with a camera to watch her when we weren't in the room to make sure that she didn't try to leave the bed. She kept trying to do things on her own and she would fall. Well, one night, my sister and I were upstairs in her bedroom talking, and we looked at the monitor screen, and I instantly started crying from what I saw. It's hard to describe what we saw. The only thing that comes close to what it looked like was a mix of a gremlin and a goblin. We watched it jump on her bed. She was asleep, but it seemed like she knew that it was there because she made a movement with her hand like she was hitting it away. When she did that, it left. My sister went downstairs to check on her. She was still sleeping and nothing was there. It was one of the scariest things I've ever seen in my life, and even after 6 years, just the thought of it makes the hair on my arm stand up and my eyes begin to tear up. It's not just because how scary it looked, but because the way it made me feel. Even through the monitor, you could feel its presence, and you could feel it was not good, whatever it was. The next night, my sister and I were back up in the bedroom watching a movie, and my sister looked at the monitor and studied it for a second and told me to look at it, which after what I had already witnessed, I was terrified to even look, but I did, and as clear as day, you could see a head behind my grandma, which looked like how she looked at the time, bald and sick. So we took a picture of the monitor screen this time, and we zoomed in to see what it was. And we noticed that there was a head, but above that head was my uncle's face. You could see his features. You could recognize that it was him if you knew him. He was my grandma's son who died a few years back from cancer. While I don't really believe in God, and I'm not sure where I stand in the afterlife, even after all my experiences, it was a feeling of relief seeing this after the horror I saw the night before. Almost like him saying, "It's okay, I got her." I have no idea what this head was behind her. My sister thinks it could be her starting to leave her body. It did look like it was her, just watching her body laying there. A couple days later, she passed away. For the next month, we stayed there to pack up her house, and we sold it. While there were some weird experiences from time to time, that was pretty normal for that house. And it seemed like all the insane activity that occurred while she was dying had left with her. But I'll never forget the things I saw in that house during the time. Even as I'm writing all of this, I get the goosebumps. I do have a picture we took of the monitor. It's pretty unsettling and shows my grandma too, so I'm not sure it should post unless I'm able to cover it, in which I did. Here's the photo that I took of my grandma. In 2004, I was an 18-year-old freshman attending state school 2 hours away from where I grew up. I might have had big plans to change the world, but I was still daddy's little girl, and I had a hard time cutting the cord. I ended up going home to visit my parents every couple of weeks though. It was a boring drive, and I would listen to audiobooks to pass the time. That's how I discovered Stephen King's story collection, Skeleton Crew. In one of the stories, Mrs. Todd's Shortcut, a woman finds a wormhole while exploring the back roads. Something about that one connected with my sense of adventure. It inspired me to take a different route home every time I drove back. It was easy enough at first, but pretty soon I had to scour the map to find new paths from point A to point B. And since I'm submitting my experience to this true horror channel, it goes without saying that one day it all went spectacularly wrong. It started with car trouble. I was on a beautiful dirt road, enjoying the scenery, when my vehicle started vibrating so hard that it was impossible to control. I thought it was a flat tire, something I was capable of fixing, but it wasn't. All 4 tires were fine, which meant I was stuck in the middle of nowhere in need of a taxi and a tow. I was on an agricultural road, south of the interstate. I guessed I was 20 miles from the next town and maybe 2 or 3 miles from a road that would take me to the freeway. I've been on the side of the road for almost an hour, and not a single car passed by. I started packing my stuff up. It was time to start walking. I figured there was a house somewhere on this road where I could ask to use the phone. But as I got out of my car, I could hear an approaching vehicle in the distance. I thanked my lucky stars and I waved it down. The driver pulled over in front of my car. A relatively attractive guy in his 20s stepped out. He had me pop the hood and looked at my engine. He stared at it for a long time and then offered to drive me to a payphone. Despite being good looking, there was something off about him. I sensed it right away, and I might have declined his offer if I didn't see a photo of a kid hanging from his rearview mirror. The idea of him being a dad overrode my gut instinct, and I accepted. As we drove, he was mostly quiet. We made some small talk, but it felt forced, and it seemed like he refrained from looking at me in my eyes. Every time he glanced in my direction, it felt like his focus was on my body and not my face. I suddenly regretted going in a crop top instead of wearing something more conservative. When I saw the turnoff to the interstate, I felt a sense of relief. I looked out on the road and waited for him to slow down, but he didn't. When I protested, he told me that the road was under construction and we'd have to take the next one. There weren't any detour signs, and I pointed that out to him. He shrugged it off, saying he must have got them mixed up and we'd take the next one. I argued that we could still turn around, but he said it wouldn't make any difference because the tow truck would be coming from the town anyway. At this point, I started to become scared. I had a gnawing fear that he had no intention of ever taking me to a payphone. So I bluffed and I told him that I needed to go to the bathroom ASAP. He started to slow down, and again, I felt this sense of relief. But then he stopped on the side of a road and told me to go ahead and use the bushes and that he would wait. My bluff had worked, but not in the way that I hoped. I stepped out of the car and I started to walk. I was maybe 20 feet away when he called after me, telling me not to go too far because there were coyotes around. I walked around 20 feet to the top of a hill and caught a glimpse of a lake. It was massive, much bigger than it seemed on the map. I pretended to squat down and debated whether or not I should make a run for it. I was a swimmer back in high school, and I felt confident that I could outswim this guy if I could make it to the water. And then I heard him, slowly creeping toward me. He knew I wanted privacy, and yet here he was trying to sneak a peek. That was the decider. I sprang to my feet and I sprinted toward the lake as fast as I could. It must have caught him by surprise because I got off to a huge lead before him starting to run after me. And I needed every single step. He was bigger and faster, and every time I glanced back, he was closer than the time before. I started to think that he would catch me, that my fate was sealed. And then the woods cleared, and I was at the shore, and once knee deep, I dove in. I cross-stroked for a solid 100 meters before I dared to look back. He was still on the shore, watching me. I stopped swimming and treaded water for a few minutes and realized that he wasn't going anywhere. He was going to stand there and wait for me. I knew that if I didn't try to swim across, either hypothermia would set in or eventually I'd tire out and drown. Nightfall was quickly approaching. I tried swimming parallel to the shore to see what he would do. He followed me, step for stroke, keeping an eye on me for the entire time. It was cat and mouse and I was losing. And then at that exact moment, I heard the boat. In the distance, a fishing boat was headed out to deep water. The man chasing me obviously saw it as well because he made his move. He got a decent jump on me before I started swimming for my life. The 100-meter lead quickly became 75, and then 50, and then 25 before he started to win, and I was able to pull away again. As the boat neared, I stopped swimming so I could wave and scream. It was a fisherman and his young son. They pulled me out of the water and I explained to them what had happened. We looked for the man, but he had disappeared into the dark of night. No sight, no sound. The fisherman was nice enough to call off his fishing trip and drop me off at the local police station. An officer took my statement while I waited for my dad to come pick me up. I finally let my emotions take over and I bawled the entire time. The man was never found, but I doubt too much effort went into finding him. After all, he hadn't committed any crimes. I accepted the ride voluntarily. I wasn't abducted, and since he never caught me, no battery or assault had occurred. I got one of those Nokia brick phones the next day. My car got a new axle a few days later, and I eventually went back to driving home on a regular basis, but never on the back roads. I always took the interstate. I decided to leave that adventuring stuff to Mrs. Todd. When I was 19 years old in 1985 on New Year's Eve, a bunch of my friends and I went to a rooftop bar of a hotel. About a half hour before midnight, I ran down to my car because I had forgotten my camera. I figured I would have plenty of time to get back up there and find my friends. I grabbed my camera and I got into an elevator all by myself. About halfway up, the elevator started shaking and it stopped completely. I was trapped. I have always had a problem with confined spaces, so this was not an ideal situation for me. After a few minutes, everything went silent that was going on outside. Then out of nowhere, the elevator lights went out, and I started to hear children laughing, but this was not the type of place where children would be. My heart started beating faster and faster and harder. Then all of a sudden, I passed out. As I woke up, I noticed that I could not move or talk. I thought to myself, not sleep paralysis again. Then the lights started to flicker on and off, and then all of a sudden, I see a black figure to the left of me in the corner of the elevator, crouching down, smiling at me. I tried to scream, but nothing would come out. I tried to move, but I couldn't. A guy came over the loudspeaker and told me there was an electrical short and that he would have me out soon. There's a camera in the elevator, so to the security guard it looked like I was just laying there. I guess they figured I was drunk, being that it's New Year's. Anyways, every attempt to scream or move, that figure would just start laughing at me and pointing. This whole time the lights are flickering. Then all of a sudden, I can hear the huge crowds counting down for New Year's. 10. The dark figure is staring at me, and now with a menacing smile, with 10 fingers up. 9. He's still looking at me with 9 fingers up, and he's moving closer. 8. He was still looking at me with 8 fingers up, and he's closer. 7. The same thing. 6. The same thing. 5. The same thing. 4. He's drooling, and he's much closer. 3. He's closer. 2. He was closer. Then the lights quit flickering, and it was pitch black. Then all of a sudden, outside went silent again. I felt breathing in my right ear. And then out of nowhere I hear 1. I couldn't breathe. The lights started to flicker again, and then the figure was on my chest. And all of a sudden it was gone. And I can talk and move again. Usually when I have sleep paralysis, something bad happens. Once I got out of the elevator an hour later, I found out that there was a brawl during the countdown on the rooftop bar that I was at, and 4 people were killed by some maniac who was waiting until the end of the countdown to start hacking up people with a machete. Ever since then, I have not had a sleep paralysis episode. I used to have a group of friends that would explore every and anything scary in random places. People we knew would request for us to explore abandoned buildings, and we go there and record it. We had a process. What we would do is meet up at my friend Andy's house and discuss which request seems like the scariest, and we would put them in order and go with the one that ranks the highest first. So one day, we decided to go to this place that was known to have a haunted boiler room. Sounds like it was straight out of Nightmare on Elm Street. We posted on Facebook that we were going there first, and everyone was excited for us. We drove to an area that was about a mile from the place, so we could record our walk to the place. Andy got there before us to scout out the area, and he made a route for us to walk. As we were waiting for him, we saw him running back with a worried look on his face. He told us that the route to get to this place was through the forest. He said that wasn't even the bad part. He mentioned that he saw a random person dressed in dark clothing coming out of a random tunnel within the woods. He also said that the man looked a little rough. From that point on, we began to record, and what we found was scarier than anything we ever explored before.
hell?
We got out of there with the quickness because the smell was making us sick. It was exactly what it looked like. That person had been down there for days. Or maybe weeks, we don't know. Like any other story like this, we called the cops. My friend really didn't get a good look at the guy that left the tunnel, but he told the cops what he saw. And from that day on, the cops never really gave us an update, so there was nothing more I could tell you about that case. We just found a body.
Nightmare Files.